This is the No Pricks Allowed podcast with Aaron Buchner from Cactus. Sit back, listen in, and enjoy the show.
I could have retired 10 years earlier if I had stayed in my first job. Instead, I decided to not take the smart financial decision. In 2010, I started my first job. Well, my first career position. I had a job working at Canadian Tire as a receiver in the local store. I would rise before the sun to unload trucks. And they were full of random merchandise ranging from car tires to small kitchen appliances. Each day was a different adventure, as we never knew what would be coming in on the trucks. The job was exactly what it was, a job, and not a whole lot more. I never pictured myself moving up in the ranks at the local retail store. It was something pulling money to pay for bills and keep me busy while my wife was at school getting her master's. But my first career job, my first full-time job, was as a field merchandiser with Canadian Tire Corporation. For people who have no idea what that is, let me simplify it for you. You know when you walk into a store and everything's changed? They've moved the ketchup, which was in aisle 4, next to the mustard, and now it's in aisle 15 with the barbecue sauce. And you get frustrated because you had just learned where everything was in the store and you knew how to get in and get out really quickly, and now it's a gigantic hassle. Yeah, I'm the guy who makes those changes. I'm the evil villain in this whole story. Now, I was making good money in the role. My wage doubled from where it was, plus I had benefits. It was nothing amazing by the stretch, but it was close to almost $60,000 a year. Now, remember, this was 2010. That was pretty impressive money for someone just getting a first job. For a kid out of university and getting his first real paying job, this money was huge. I'm not going to deny it. Having that kind of income meant I could do more than just survive. I could still remember opening the large manila envelope, a heart pounding to see the offer letter, and I was taken back by that pay increase I had just received. I remember calling my wife and happily explaining I got the job. I got the job. Now, the job had other perks because I spent a lot of time on the road. While I was away, everything was paid for. So the hotels I stayed in, the gas I had to expend, food I needed to eat, and a little bit of money for entertainment. I mean, I spent nothing when I was working. I was doing nothing but pocketing my paycheck each month. And I had the added benefit, at that time I was living with my parents while we were still trying to figure out where to move next. So I had zero expenses. But this job had a fair share of downfalls. I was on the road for 2 weeks at a time in a city I didn't know for 4 months at a time. I was not working for stores in major cities. I wasn't in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa, but I was in small rural stores with populations of less than 60,000 people. Every day, walking to that store for the first time was like being a freshman at the local high school you just moved to. You're that weird outsider in town. It always felt just like how it happens in the movies when that new guy shows up for the first day of class and you're being introduced by the teacher to all the kids and they're just staring at you, making snap judgments. It was always weird that first morning being introduced to the staff of the store. You could feel the judgmental eyes as you were introduced to the store employees. They already knew I was the villain. I was the corporate fat cat, really just a middleman between them and the corporate juggernaut. But I was the one who was coming into their small town where they were happy and had been for years to uproot what they knew and make it all shiny and new. That tension, it wears on you. Now, during those 2-week stretches, I lived out of hotels, the kind with the continental breakfasts where everything tastes flaky like cardboard and burnt coffee. I was in no 5-star places. Every morning, I'd sit alone at a tiny table, eating my scrambled eggs that were powdered, most likely, watching the local news play in the background. Lunch usually consisted of a sandwich from a local diner or a fast food burger, and I ate alone in my car so I could think in peace for 10 minutes. Dinner was usually at the local pub, sitting in those high stools that had leather seats that were definitely worn and ripped, and having 1 or 2 beers. I'd be looking at my BlackBerry, answering emails I'd received all day, but didn't have the time to answer until then. And between those emails and refills, I would catch myself wondering, is this it? I was making money, but I felt hollow. Being alone not only made those 2 weeks on the road difficult, it added to my stress level. I was overworked and stressed all the time, as the job was relentless. The timelines to flip a store were basically set in stone, down to the minute. If things were late to be delivered or we fell behind schedule, that weight of keeping that project and the timelines was on me. I had to weigh that burden. I was spending close to 12 hours a day training new workers, the skills they needed, fighting with current employees who hated the change, constantly planning for the next 2 weeks and trying to make up for lost time because we were always behind. When I was able to go home for 48 hours, I'd drive home on a Friday night and I'd have to return on Sunday night. I was exhausted. I don't know about you, but I never sleep well in hotels. The bed never feels right because it's not your bed. It's not your home. You're sleeping in a bed hundreds of other people have slept before, staring at the popcorn ceiling the same way everyone else has. On top of that, my mind is constantly on, thinking about all the changes of the day and the challenges and figuring out, okay, well, what went wrong and how can we overcome these obstacles to get back on track? The answer usually came down to, I have to put in some extra hours because there just wasn't enough manpower to help out. Now, when I did get home, my wife was excited to see me because she had been alone for 2 weeks as well. Because after about a year on the job, we did move out of my parents' place and we found our own place to live. And of course, she wanted to do something like go out for dinner and reconnect. I didn't want to eat out because I had just done that for 2 weeks straight. And when you've been eating fast food and someone else is cooking, the last thing you want to do when you get home is go out for dinner. And I had 2 weeks worth of laundry I had to do and wanted to just sleep in my own bed. This was not only putting stress on myself, but also my wife. She was happy I was home and she wanted to see me. And I wanted to see her as well. It was always an amazing jolt when I would see her that Friday night. But that feeling faded as my mind shifted from what had to be done at the store to what had to be done around the house. And that miserable feelings that I had started to hurt the relationship because I was not the man she married, but I was a ghost of myself. I was physically there, but mentally and emotionally, I was gone those 2 days because I was just so stressed and tired. And it always made me wonder, I was making great money and I should be happy. I only had a mortgage that we could afford on one of our paychecks, and I was still able to cash into an investment about $2,000 a month. I was on the road to financial success as a 26-year-old. So why was I so unhappy? Shouldn't I have all this money? Shouldn't having all this money make me happy? Society tells me having money should make you happy, right? But when your paycheck goes up, your problems go down, right? But it wasn't. I was stressed. I was miserable, and I could feel this daily. I was regretting my job, having to prove my wealth and knowledge as a 26-year-old to people twice my age, owners of the businesses who just expected me to do everything for them. And when you're in as deep as I was, I started to justify the feelings. I was telling myself things like, this is what success is like. You have to pay your dues, work through these tough times, and you will make it, just like the American dream. And it's funny being a Canadian and we talk about the American dream because we hear it a lot. And for me, having gone through the high school in the States, I firsthand saw that American dream everyone talked about, not just what we see in TVs and movies. I learned about grandparents and parents of colleagues in high school who started a job from nothing and built it into a huge success story. As in a kid who grew up in lower middle class with hand-me-down clothes and ate mac and cheese about twice a week, being successful and having money for all the things you wanted was a dreamland. Now, every success story started the same. They worked hard, long hours, more than anyone else around them, working through the tough situations that would break a normal person to reach this pinnacle of success. And it was the situation I was currently in. I was living through these tough times these people were talking about. And if I could battle my internal struggles and listen to the voice in my head of, sometimes, sure, these times are hard, but the success at the end of the road, and that is what you're aiming for. This pain will go away. This too shall pass. This was the moment where I had to make a decision of what path do I want to make in my life. Do I follow the path so many people before had done and start pushing through these difficult times and even though this would be short-lived, I would get to some dream happy ending? Or do I draw the line in the sand and walk away from it all? Those visions of early retirement, having enough money so that I could purchase the things I wanted, to having the life my parents never did when raising me and my brothers. This choice is a difficult one that can't be taken lightly, as it'll change the whole trajectory of my life. One path was money, status, and burnout. The other was everything else. It was my marriage, my health, and my sanity. And there's a saying in finance we use a lot, take the emotions out of investing, which talks about having those knee-jerk reactions to investing news, buying when you hear about a hot stock or selling when everything falls off. But that saying has been stretched by some to cover everything in finance, that your decisions about how to make money and your choices should all be made without considering your emotions. I don't believe in that. If you take out emotions, pursuing money becomes emotionless and uninteresting. You have to consider emotions when you decide any financial decision. We can't live our lives with walls around us, swallowing our emotions to make decisions solely based on the smart financial outcome. For me, emotions will always be factored in. And that is why in my decision, I choose the latter. I decided to not take the smart financial route. I made the conscious decision to focus on my life. I knew in my heart if I kept down this road, though I would end up financially well, my life was going to suffer. The woman I fell in love with might possibly leave me, as I was focusing too much my energy on work than on her. My health would continue to get worse as I was using alcohol and food and caffeine as medication to allow me to work through these tough times. That vision of me being alone and unhealthy was not something I wanted. I wanted to better my life. I wanted to gain control of who I was again and keep my wife and family. And that was what, and still is, so important to me. So I quickly moved out into a new job where I was the bottom of the pay grade to the position where I was at the top, meaning there was no raises for me until I was able to move to another position, which might take a few more years. My salary was capped, even though I was giving up this path to early financial success. You know what I did get? I got to be home. I got to sleep, and I needed sleep. I was able to be happy and rekindle my relationship with my wife, as I was actually able to have conversations with her, not just venting fest about the crappy 2 weeks I just had in being alone. I also saved my stomach from ulcers from the 5 cups of coffee I needed daily on the job. But most importantly, I felt like me, albeit a 2-year-old version of myself with a lot more gray hair. Yes, my stressful job for 2 years resulted in me getting gray hair, as you see now. The good news is I won't be going bald, at least. I learned through this experience, money is not everything. I live the story. I've been the guy who thought the paycheck brought happiness. And I've been the guy who learned it is not. I figured out having more money didn't make me happy if it came at the expense of my health. For the longest time, I believed that the only way to get ahead was to work harder, longer, and sacrifice more. That's what we're told. That if you just push through the exhaustion, if you just hold out a little longer, one day it'll all pay off. But when we never talk about is the costs along the way, the missed dinners with family, the weekends spent working instead of resting, the constant background noise of stress that follows you everywhere. When you're chasing financial success, it's so easy to convince yourself that this is just temporary, that you'll make time for your health later, or you'll see your friends later, and things will eventually slow down. But the truth is, life doesn't wait for you to find balance. You either make space for it, or it quietly slips away. Building wealth is important, but it's not everything. Don't fall into the trap of thinking the only way to improve your future is to sacrifice your present. Maybe this means saying no to overtime so you can actually say yes to dinner with your kids. Maybe it means choosing a job that pays a lot less but lets you actually sleep, actually breathe, and actually live. Because the truth is, your financial plan isn't just about dollars. It's about designing a life that feels fulfilling and sustainable. It's about finding that point where your money supports your happiness and doesn't replace it. Something we often forget about. Money does not buy happiness. Money will solve your current problems, but then new ones will appear. As you level up your life, you level up your problems as well. More money will not eliminate all your problems. It will just cause new ones to appear. So as you work towards your goals, remember this. Yes, save. Yes, invest. Yes, plan. But also live. The best return on investment you'll ever get is a life you don't want to escape from. I take this approach with my clients when it comes to their finances. When I talk to people about financial planning, I remind them it is not all about the numbers. We don't chase higher returns. We chase happiness. We don't try and lower tax rates. We try and lower your frustrations. We don't maximize your net worth. We maximize your life. In the end, all of this, building wealth, reaching your goals, it shouldn't hurt. A philosophy I've adapted into my practice. Now, I wrote an article and dropped it on my website where I talk more about the impacts of stress on your finance, how a lack of sleep and stress hurts your heart, your health, as well as your financial decisions. I also give a few tips on things you should consider on your journey to improve your finances. And I'll have that link in the show notes below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and listen to the next podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the No Pricks Allowed podcast with Aaron Buchner from Cactus. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at prickfree.com or give us a call at 613-876-9899. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views, opinions of Cactus. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The contents of this podcast do not constitute an offer or solicitation for residence in any other jurisdiction, where either Aaron Buchner and/or Sterling Mutuals is not registered or permitted to conduct business. The opinions expressed are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Sterling Mutuals, Inc. Mutual funds provided through Sterling Mutuals, Inc. Commissions trailing commissions, management fees, and expenses. All may be associated with mutual fund investments that please read the prospectus carefully before investing. Mutual funds are not guaranteed. Their values fluctuate frequently, and past performance may not be repeated.